It's the one thing guaranteed to mess you up forever. It's the one thing we all want, hate, need, and despise at the same time. I'll bet you can sing the words to all of these songs. What's love got to do with it? Nothing compares to you. She loves you. Wicked Game, Love Song, Dance Me to the End of Love. So I set out with 6 big questions. I ask, is love unconditional? I ask, can you ever fall out of love? I ask, can a secret love stay a secret? I ask, can you die of a broken heart? I ask, where do love and sex meet? And I ask, is love enough to keep people together? Love, what a beast. What a fucker. What an absolutely impossible thing to pin down, to describe, or to understand. And I won't pretend in this episode to give any answers to the big question of love. But what I will do is I'll take you through some of the conversations I've had, the moments where people have really exposed themselves, the moments where people have really laid themselves bare, and the moments where I had to stop listening to just cry and think and laugh and wonder, will we ever get to the bottom of this fucking wonderful, difficult and beautiful thing called love is? Welcome to Extraordinary Stories Podcast. Hey, how are you? Are you well? Are you good? I am. Okay, so some of that that I just said there, I heard it as I was saying it, and I was thinking it's got that real like sort of Carrie Bradshaw Sex and the City like shit about it, hasn't it? That bullshitty. Oh, so I was just thinking about love, and yeah, it's just all that, but. That's not what this is. This is me. I threw the net wide here. You may remember from a previous episode, I asked people to get in touch and help me create episode 40. And I gave such a huge subject. I just said, love. Go for it. It's so big. It's so varied. But I deliberately did that because I wanted to get stories that would come from all angles. I wanted to be in a position where I could receive all types of material and then give it back in some way that I can slightly understand these stories, and hopefully they're stories that you can connect with. I think that you will. People were so generous. So generous. They handed me their most intimate moments. And because of that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to protect the people who gave me their stories. And a lot of people said, just say it. Just name who I am. Just say the thing. You know, if people want to kind of like come at me through Facebook or through whatever, they can. I made a bit of an executive decision on it and thought, do you know what? I'm just going to protect everybody in these stories. Okay, so some of the names that you'll hear have been changed. And they've just been changed because... I have to put this without me going on a big long rant. I just want to get on with the episode, but I don't know how to, or I just want to get to telling you the stories. Basically, it's one of these weird things where if you ask someone, "Oh, what's your story?" or "Tell me about this thing," it's a really cathartic moment for people to give you their story without realising that actually that's an incredibly exposing place to be in. And so the last thing that I would ever want to do is exploit people who've given me their stories. I mean, it's all well and good, and people will share. They'll tell you every fucking element of their life. They'll tell you every wee detail of their sex life and their whatever. But it's a different thing when someone hands you that story. And I've really realised that with this process, that actually it's very difficult. Someone hands you their story. It's like you've got this little tiny thing in your hand, and you need to be really careful about how you treat it. So that's why I'm going to protect the people involved. Anyway, I asked those 6 questions, and I have 6 stories. The titles of those stories are: number 1, We Are Strangers. Number 2, Grace is Love. Number 3, The Duvet. Number 4, Mr. Showtime. Number 5, One Shot at This. And number 6, A Kind of Love That We Need to Talk About. Okay, let's go. So this story came to me in the form of a letter in the post. Great. It's really old school, but I really loved it actually. I really loved receiving post. So the person writing this letter to me is a young, vibrant, gorgeous, full of life, funny female who I've sort of come to know a little bit in the past while, and so she sent me this letter. And this is one of her major experiences of love, and it goes like this. Growing up, my family was very poor. My parents were teenagers who dropped out of school in the 7th grade. We bounced around, living with various family members and sometimes living in public parks. My mother and the father, they fought all the time. I was very much a daddy's girl, and my mother knew that the easiest way to hurt my father was to go after me. She never hit me, but she was emotionally abusive. I felt like it was me and my dad against the world. When I was 14, my parents split up for good. My father left for another woman, and he left me behind with my mum. This was really hard. He didn't call, and he didn't visit. Eventually, I moved in with my grandparents, and I stayed with them until I was 18. I moved out to attend university. Between the ages of 14 and 18, I had only spoken with my father a few times. He wouldn't return my calls. He would cancel plans. He put his new girlfriend ahead of everything. I once tried to move in with them, but his girlfriend, she told my father that I'd called her a whore, and he kicked me out. So it was Christmas time. It was Christmas time, and this was my first year of university. I came home to my grandparents' house, and my father and his girlfriend were there. My extended family was there. My dad announced that they were pregnant. I went to congratulate my dad, and he told me that he now has a new family. He told me that he did not need me. My heart was broken. It's been 10 years since that moment. I've seen him once since then, and I've only spoken to him twice. For the past 6 years, I haven't heard from him. First I was sad, then I was angry, and now I'm resigned. The person I love the most in the world does not know me. Didn't see me graduate college. Does not know my partner. He just doesn't care to be involved. We are strangers. And I don't know if we will ever be more than that. Okay, that's the end of story 1. We are strangers. Okay, now we move on to Jay's story. Jay's response to love comes in the form of the story Grace is Love. So, Jay starts with him being born in late 1969 in Baltimore, Maryland, and he has a beautiful wife named Shannon. Jay and Shannon, they met at a wedding in 2000 where Jay was the guest of someone else in the wedding party and Shannon was a last minute guest when someone had pulled out. So fate, chance, Cupid, whatever, whatever you think it was, put these two strangers together on the same table at a wedding. I think it was Cupid. I think Cupid put them there on that same day at that wedding. So they dated. Jay proposed, and just 9 days shy of the day that they had met, they married. So like a young couple in love, looking to the future, Jay and Shannon decide they want to have kids. Jay says, for a while we tried and we tried, which in and of itself was obviously great. So they're trying and they're trying, but Shannon just isn't falling pregnant. So they both, and again this is as Jay puts it, they went to get their plumbing tested. And they discovered that Shannon's body was having difficulties in conceiving. From here, the couple decide that they're going to go through some IVF, which is a massive undertaking for anybody. For a couple, I mean, it's just so emotionally and, I mean, financially, it's just, yeah. If you invest in IVF, it's huge. And the results of that can be devastating. And for Jay and for Shannon, it really was devastating. They had 3 goes at it, and it just didn't work. She just still wasn't pregnant. But they decide they're just going to do it one more time. Okay, attempt number 4. And this time, it works. So they're thrilled. They're fucking beyond themselves with excitement. As you would be. My God, as you would be. And now, here is Jay describing that first scan that the couple go for.
The tech is looking at the screen while she's doing the ultrasound, and she's like circling stuff and taking notes. And, you know, I asked her what all that was for. She's like, this is just for the doctor to look at. And she's like measuring stuff. She's like, you could see the baby is like a profile view of the baby, and you could see her like making little marks and X's, and then she like makes this line in between the top of the spine and what appeared to be the skin of the baby, and like put a line in between the two and saved it. And I said, you know, by the way, I'm in a good mood at this time. We're looking at our first kid. The heart is beating and all that stuff. I'm just on top of the world. My wife is even happier. So I asked, well, what was that right there? And she paused for a couple, maybe 3 seconds, 4 seconds, and said, the doctor will come in and talk to you guys about it.
When the doctor comes in to speak to Jay and Shannon, she isn't a friendly doctor, and she doesn't beat around the bush with the couple. In fact, Jay describes her to me as a cunt. Now, he assures me that that word in America is a lot worse than it is in Scotland. So, I'll take your word for it, Jay. She tells the couple that there is a problem with the baby. It had a nuchal translucency of 8.3. Huh? What does this mean? Well, it leaves Jay and Shannon asking the same thing. What the hell is that? So the doctor goes on to explain that between the spine and the upper part of the neck, there is a build-up of fluid on the baby, which shouldn't be there at a 12-week scan. And in some babies, when they see the build-up of fluid, it's an indicator of Down syndrome. In some, it's an indicator of Edwards syndrome, which the effects of Edwards syndrome are way worse than Down syndrome. The quality of life is far, far less. So the doctor looks at it again and she rules out Down syndrome. But she's not ruling out Edwards syndrome. And so she leaves Jay and Shannon with this information to deal with.
The doctor said, your baby has a 5 to 10% chance of even making it to term. And if it does go to term, it probably won't survive once it's outside the womb. So that was obviously devastating because we've been trying for a few years to get pregnant.
So from here, they are referred to a doctor in Tampa, a high-risk pregnancy doctor, and they go through ultrasounds every 2 weeks. And in every meeting with the doctor, Jay and Shannon go in, brave as you can, just ready to hear what they need to hear from the doctor. And the doctor prepares them for all possibilities. But he continues to remind them of the worst possible outcomes. In his own words, Jason describes the feelings at the time.
It was just a real heaviness in the house, obviously. It was just the two of us.
So, Jay's story takes a left turn here, and he starts to talk about, as he puts it, his relationship with a higher power. Jay will speak really honestly at this point and say that although he thought the big beardy man who lives in the sky is complete balls, something in him is going to change. Jay's now about to have one of the most important moments in his life, and it is a privilege to hear him describe it.
I was out of options, so to speak, and just felt kind of powerless and hopeless, So I went out to my driveway by myself. It was beautiful out. It was warm out. And, alright, I gotta get it together. And, prayed. Probably the first time in my true adult life. I didn't pray for the baby, though. I didn't pray, oh, please, God, let the baby be okay. But what I did do is pray for my wife. And I can't really remember verbatim because it was 2005, but it was something to the effect of, let her have this. Let her have this. She's a great woman and she'll be a great mom. Whatever. And, this is the, what we were like, what happened, and what we're like now stuff. Well, this is the what happened part. I physically felt it. As sure as I'm talking in my phone right now, I felt this warmth. And it started at my scalp. And I mean, I felt it. This warm, like if I was being scanned, And it just went from my head to my feet. And it took about 45 seconds, if I had to estimate. And I just stood there, still, completely still. I couldn't hear anything. I had my eyes closed. And I just felt this warm, weird feeling just envelop my body. It was really, really weird. But it was a physical touch. And it was really bizarre. But when it was done, I didn't even say amen or nothing. I just I knew it was over. And I knew from that second that everything was going to be okay. And I cannot explain that. I can't explain it. Because we were just told hours before that our kid was most likely going to be dead in no time.
So Jay and Shannon are still having regular high-risk checkups. And they start to get to know the staff who they're seeing regularly, and they get to know all the people that are doing the checkups, and this particular nurse and that particular person. And there's a nurse, and she says, oh, and I can understand this, she starts to dread their visits because she just wants it to be okay for them. So when she sees that they're coming in that day, she starts to dread it. They're told that the fluid buildup is nearly 3 times the size that it should be. A doctor explains this means one of 2 things. Either the baby will be born dead or close to death. In the close to death situation, it's that the baby will be enveloped in fluid. Then this happens. On the next scan, doctors look closer and they see that the sac of fluid is beginning to dissipate. It's going down. It's not fully gone, but it's not what it was. Jay says the baby still has a heartbeat. I don't want to take this away from this story at the moment, but I actually just couldn't even cope with the sentence, the baby still has a heartbeat. Those words just, I just don't even know. I don't even know how to feel about those words. That literally like hit me like a brick. The baby still has a heartbeat. Doctors tell Jay and Shannon not to get their hopes up. Don't think in any way that this is over. So they're told the fluid's disappearing, but it's likely that if the baby survives, it will have to have a neck operation really quickly. The neck of the baby isn't developing properly. It has major problems. And although surgery can happen, it doesn't mean that it's going to fix anything. And so now the time arrives for Jay and Shannon to have their baby.
All right, so fast forward to the birthday. We get her ready for surgery. She puts her makeup on, does her toenails, and goes into surgery. And the doctor slices open her belly and pulls this little child out. And she's perfect. She's perfect. Her neck is perfect. Her little face is perfect. She's gorgeous. She was fucking beautiful. She was just perfect in every way. She was gorgeous, her little baby. Named her Grace Ella Rose Engelke.
My God, what a roller coaster for these two. I just can't even imagine. I mean, I know I'm opening this up to so many people who've never conceived, who've lost children, never been able to, but it's just too terrible to think about all those things. But just this moment, just this couple and their baby. So they asked the doctor, what happened here? We were given a 5 to 10% chance and now she's here and we don't understand. And the doctor says, I don't know. Sometimes medical miracles happen and we just can't explain them. Jay and Shannon call their baby Grace. Oh, lovely. She's healthy. She's happy. Jay says she doesn't always clean her room and sometimes she's a bit picky about food. She has all the annoying things that a child should and will have. But when these moments occur, Jay remembers that she might never have been born at all. Or she might have been born dead. And I'll leave this story with some final words from Jay.
The only question was going to be, was she going to be affected, like physically or whatever, by all this? And they pulled her out and they laid her on this table to, wipe off the birth goo and all that. The first thing I did was look at her neck. And there was nothing there except a beautiful little baby neck. And at that point, I knew, wow, I was right. Whatever that was, that weird, warm scanning thing in my driveway, it told me that she was going to be 100% okay, and it was right. I can't explain it. Other than, it was something.
And so ends Grace is Love. So, from Jay's story, I I just really thought about grief. I thought about lots of things. I thought about the joy they must have felt when Grace was born. I don't know. I stayed on the grief thing for a while because I'm guessing here because I've not been in that position, and I hate bastards who try to pretend that they know everything about fucking everything. I don't. I've never been in that position. I really haven't. But I imagine that there's a level of grief during that process when you don't know if your baby's going to die. So you just don't know. And it made me think, and this is maybe it's a bit of a random left turn, but it made me think about that sort of love-grief relationship, what that is, how that exists, how the two things coexist. And it led me to, and it is a bit of a left turn, but it led me to thinking about Queen Victoria. I know it sounds odd, but it's always fascinated me, the way that Queen Victoria dealt with the death of her husband. So, if you don't know, and I'm pretty sure you will, Queen Victoria was married to Prince Albert and they had 9 children together, and at the time she was the ruling monarch of Britain. And when he died, the way that she dealt with his death is just absolutely unique. Records show now that she absolutely refused to have anything in his room or any of his possessions touched by anyone except her. She turned his room into a shrine to Albert. She also wore black from the day that he died until the day that she died. She refused to wear any other colour. She became known as the Widow of Windsor. This one really, it really sticks with me, this fact. She would have a warm glass of milk sent up every night to Albert's room after he was dead. The warm glass would be laid down next to the empty bed, and in the morning it would be taken away, and so on and so on. And I know that there's people like, I kind of love the Queen Victoria stuff. I've told people before that these facts about Queen Victoria, and some people will go, that's just creepy. I think it's weird. But I don't. I get that. I think that there's something really touching in that. I mean, I know it's fucking odd to have a warm glass of milk sent up to an empty room. But if it's your way of dealing with grief, then just, get on with it. Because that's your way of doing it. And nobody has any right to tell you how to grieve. So, once I'd kind of gotten here in the love process, I sort of went down this road and I found the story of Len and Dee Dee. So this is story number 3, The Duvet. Okay, this comes from Paul, who very kindly sent me the story of his parents. Thank you, Paul. Len and Dee Dee lived in Southampton in England. And they met at school when Len was 17 and Dee Dee was 15. So they started to date. And when Dee Dee turned 16, they married. They went on to have 2 children. A son called Paul, who gave me this story, and a daughter, Leanne. So people who knew the couple said that the love that they had for each other was as fierce as the day that they had met. They just continued to be in love all the way through their life. So the kids grew up, they left home, they went off, had their own families. So Len and Dee Dee, they both retired aged 50. And this gave them all the time in the world to just be with each other. When they both reached their 60s, health problems began to plague them. Len was told there was a problem with his heart. His heart was weak. But when they got this news, they both immediately made every change possible to their lifestyle. Dee Dee wouldn't allow any food in the house which might cause Len any ill health. They started going out on long walks together. They did everything that they could to try and stay healthy. Dee Dee did every bit of research she could about how to keep a healthy heart. And they implemented all manner of changes in their life. So it started to look good. Len was told by doctors his health was improving, and the couple were delighted. It doesn't mean his heart's out of trouble, it just meant that overall his health levels were way better. So they're planning to go for a short break to the Lake District, which is a beautiful, beautiful part of England. Yeah, there's lots and lots of incredible views. There's lots of lakes, as you may guess by its name. There's just space to walk. It's gorgeous. So they pack their cases and they're getting ready to leave the next morning. Dee Dee announces it's bedtime. And usually, her and Len would go upstairs at the same time. And Len says, I'm just going to sit here and watch the rest of this TV programme. I'll be up shortly. So she goes to bed. When she wakes the next morning, Len isn't beside her. Which for Dee Dee is very, very strange. They've woken up together every day for nearly 50 years. So she heads downstairs and Len is still on the sofa. Asleep, Dee Dee thinks. But when she approaches him, she realises he's not asleep, but in fact he's dead. Len had suffered a heart attack in his sleep and was gone. So what did Dee Dee do next? Well, this. She went upstairs, she took the duvet from the bed and she brought it down to the sofa. She positioned herself next to Len's body and she covered them both with the duvet. 3 days later, their son Paul, concerned that he hadn't heard from his parents, comes to the house and, God, what he finds is just horrible. He finds both his parents dead on the sofa. It's never been explained what Dee Dee died from. A post-mortem couldn't conclude anything, but when she pulled that duvet over them, both on that sofa, it can only be guessed that Dee Dee died of a broken heart. If Len was going, she was going too. Alright, before this next story, let me just play you this tiny little clip that I got from one of the listeners who responded to helping me with this episode, and it goes like this.
It has taken years for me to learn this lesson, but I can now say with confidence and certainty that I will never do this again. I learned that changing yourself, any part of yourself, your hair, your clothing, your music, or sleeping with a guy to get him to change his feelings for you doesn't work. Unfortunately, I made this mistake over and over again with a couple of guys. and both times it lasted for years. The end result was always the same. He would be physically satisfied and I would not be. I'd go home or he would leave, and I would feel so empty and used and sorry for myself, and I would sit there and cry. And in those lucid moments, I think to myself, why am I doing this? Obviously can't handle just being a friend with benefits, so why am I sticking around? Of course, those moments of clarity didn't last long, and before I knew it, I'd be jumping in the sack again. Finally, the epiphany occurred, and this time it stuck, and there was no turning back. I cannot and will not have unfulfilling sex with some guy that doesn't like me or have any romantic interest in me. It's not good on my self-esteem, and it's emotionally exhausting.
Alright, next up in the love episode, in the love hour, is Erin's story. This one is called Mr. Showtime. Erin starts her communication with me by saying this. I'm shit at relationships, and I'm drawn to bad boys like a dog returning to vomit. She says I'm a pretty private person, especially on the internet. But she says I've never really got into mainstream dating sites. I prefer less mainstream sites where I can let my wild side out without revealing my true identity. Okay, so one day Erin is trawling the profiles on the website that she's on, and she comes across a profile, and the name is Showtimes. So Erin looks at him, and in her words, he's hot. So they talk, and she agrees to meet him. Erin meets him and she likes him. He's tall, smart, he has a sense of humour, and the most amazing six-pack. All of the ingredients that you need there. They go back to Mr. Showtime's house, and there's plenty of wine. Erin says, and this really made me laugh, unfortunately, I'm a serial first date sex offender, and I offended. I love that. But you know what? It's just one of those, like, don't apologise for it. Do you know what I mean? Just own it. I would be lying if I said that I wasn't a first date sex offender. I'm pretty sure that yeah, there's a lot of that out there, and that's fine. It's your body, do what you fucking like with it. Do you know what I mean? That's always been my opinion in life. It's your body, do what you want with it. Don't let any other ideas kind of get in the way of that. Like, you want to have sex? Fucking have sex. Okay, so Erin comes away from the first encounter thinking she's met the man of her dreams. But there are two rules that he tells her as their first night ends. Mr. Showtime says this. Rule number 1, I don't do love. Rule number 2, call me anytime. It's just ridiculous. So now Erin says in response, I get it. I'm savvy. I'm cool. I don't do love either. So he becomes fondly what she calls dial-a-route. I've got friends who use like internet dating sites, and they just like refer to them as like dial-a-fuck, dial-a-cock, those things. I just think dial-a-route is brilliant. So after a few months passes here, right? So we're after a few months, and he says to her, I'm going away for 4 weeks. And she thinks, perfect. She thinks, great. She says this, I'll get a few rides in before he goes, and then he'll be gone, and I won't. And I definitely won't fall in love with him. But he goes away, and Erin can't stop thinking about him. She can't stop thinking about the way that he looks when he's sleeping, the feel of his body, his deep, soothing voice. By this time, even his snoring has become attractive. So Mr. Showtime gets back and they hook up immediately. Again and again and again. And she says this: I've gone from casual user to addict. So during one of their usual sessions, they're at his place. They start to get it on. And he leans over to his laptop and he says, I'm just going to put some music on. So they start having sex and Erin says it was so hot. She says, I was having a great time. Now, during the time that they're having sex, Erin's phone is ringing and ringing, but she says, I was too busy to answer it. I just let it ring. A couple of hours later, they're finished. Erin says goodbye. She gets in the car, and when she gets in the car, she looks at her phone, and there's a text from a friend. The text from the friend tells her that she has just watched Erin's entire sex session on the internet. The whole thing. Mr. Showtime had live streamed the entire thing. So when he leant over to put music on, what he was doing was in fact turning the camera on in his computer and letting the world see them have sex. Erin, and again, I love this, she goes back into the house and she screams at him, you just cammed us having sex. And he denies it. Erin says her whole body was shaking and she was going ballistic. He looks at her and he says, I don't know what you're talking about, babe. Erin is exhausted. She's confused. She's angry. She has to go and pick up her kids, so she leaves. The next morning, Erin calls the computer crime section in Perth, Australia. She explains what's happened. Now, the detective says, yes, it is a crime to film someone having sex without consent, but it's really hard to prove. So basically, it's Mr. Showtime's word against Erin's. And there's no guarantee that really anything is going to happen to Mr. Showtime. In the meantime, he is trying to sweet talk her. So he's sending her messages asking her out for coffee. He's phoning her. He says, hey, whatever the problem is, I'm sure we can work it out together. And Erin believes him. She says, I believe him. Then one day, he just drops out. Gone. Completely gone. Silent. Doesn't answer texts. Won't pick up the phone. Now, she could have just let it go, but he'd committed a crime. He had literally broadcast them having sex. What Erin does next, I kind of love because I feel like I would do the same thing. She goes back to the website where they originally met and she creates a series of false profiles. So the names that she creates for these profiles are actually just brilliant. So she comes up with profiles called Bad for Your Bone, Strap On Psycho for You, and my personal favourite, and hers, Bush Piggy. Nice. So Erin thought, I'll contact him with these profiles. I'll wind him up. And eventually, I'll arrange a meeting with him. I'll arrange a sex meeting with him. But what she's also doing at this point is she's having lots of conversations with him, letting him think that they're going to have some, the most amazing meet for sex, and then dropping out, and then just leaving it behind. So she's doing this for a while, but all the time, the anger, the frustration, and the humiliation of being broadcast on the internet is driving her more and more crazy. But he's really falling for these fake profiles, and love this, Erin takes it up a level. She arranges for Bush Piggy, the fake profile, to meet Mr. Showtime. So they arrange a meeting. It's at midnight. It's in a cave, which is odd, but that's okay. Because she says, somewhere in my pea-sized brain, I was certain this would be the one thing that would make him talk. Things didn't really go to plan. Mr. Showtime arrives, expecting sex, expecting Bush Piggy, and he sees that it's Erin, and he says, "Oh no, it's you." Erin screams, "Why won't you talk to me?" She screams it over and over and over again, and he leaves. So let's give it to Erin here. She has really tried. She's gone to a whole lot of effort to speak to him, to get an answer about why he thought that was okay. So this night she doesn't really get the answer that she's looking for, but she's not finished. Love it. She's just not finished. This is when Erin decides to get her friends involved. They are all fucking outraged at what he has done. So angry with this man. So they decide to stage something brilliant. Erin and her friends create more profiles on the site. And they all start to chat with Mr. Showtime. And eventually he bites with one of those friends and he invites this friend round to his house. Not knowing that actually what was going to happen was 5 angry women were going to turn up at his door. So he opens his door thinking, great, I've found this person, we're going to have some lovely sex. And actually there's 5 women and one of them is Erin. He is home, he's horny, he's thinking, yes, here we go. And actually they barge in the house. So they're furiously demanding that he admits that he put their sex session on the internet, but also that he says sorry to Erin. But he doesn't. He doesn't say sorry, the fucking son of a bitch. Just does not say sorry. Won't admit it. Just will not admit it. He pretends he has no idea what they're even talking about. What a dick. Erin says, I tried everything to get it out of my head. I spent hundreds of dollars on counselling. I hula hooped. I swam laps. But I just can't let it go. He's committed a crime against me and now he is treating me like I'm some sort of weirdo. She says what happens next could only be described as a psychotic break. I can't take it anymore. I'm boiling with rage. I start pacing the house. I drive to the beach. I throw myself in the ocean. And I swim out praying that a shark will fucking eat me. But of course it doesn't. So she sends Mr. Showtime a text. And he ignores it. And this is now the final straw for Erin. So exhausted by trying to get anything at all out of this guy. Erin opens her fridge She sees some eggs. She takes them out. She gets a thought in her head. She's going to go to his house. She's going to throw eggs at it. And she thinks, what's he going to do? Call the cops? Well, if so, bring it fucking on. So Erin drives to his house. She pulls up at the front and she proceeds to throw 12 eggs over his door and his veranda. Her adrenaline is pumping and she feels great. She decides she's not done, so she goes back and she gets some, love this, some coconut and some flour, and she's throwing that at the house too. And as she's doing this, he's inside the house and she's screaming, why won't you talk to me? I hate what you did to me. Why won't you talk to me? So, finished with throwing things at his house, she drives home. In Erin's words, she says, at this point, I'm feeling really good. I have my dignity back. It's mine. So, feeling elated at what she's done the night before, she wakes up the next morning and she starts to think, oh dear, I could actually be in trouble here. I've actually vandalised someone's house. Although she wants police involvement for the fact that he put their sex on the internet, she doesn't really want police knocking at her door for vandalism. Then this happens. Months now of Erin contacting him. Fake profiles to trap him. Friends ambushing him. Finally, Erin gets a text from him. Mr. Showtime says this: I'm at home, cleaning up, if you want to talk. And Erin finally thinks, yes, he gets it. So she heads over and she finds him standing with a hose, trying to, not his hose, just a hose, trying to clean up the mess. They go inside and Erin hears what she's been waiting to hear for so long. He says, I'm sorry. He asks, do you want a beer? She says, yeah. And Erin ends the story with these words. We go to the kitchen and he brushes past me and I can smell him. He hands me the beer and then he just grabs me and kisses me. Before I know it, I'm gone. We fucked. It was a very wild time. And so ends the story of Mr. Showtime. Okay, story 5. One shot at this. Right, so we start this story with 3 key people. A 4th is soon to be introduced. We have Jenny, our storyteller. We have her husband, Paul, and we have their daughter, Betty. So Jenny and Paul, they have their 3-year-old, Betty. And at the time of this story, Paul decides he wants to take Betty on a trip, just the 2 of them. Why is he going on this trip? Well, it's because Paul was adopted and he had finally found his birth parents. And he wanted to visit them and bring along his daughter. His birth parents, they live in Chicago. So off he goes, leaving his wife, Jenny, behind at home. So when they get to Chicago, Paul and his daughter, but they'll be staying with a woman called Rosita. Now, Paul knew Rosita from high school. They have a brilliant trip. Betty gets to meet her grandfather and just a lovely, lovely time. And pretty soon, Paul is back home. Now, Jenny, she starts to think something is a little bit odd in his behaviour.
Paul kept talking about Rashida. Rashida. Okay. I said, oh my God, it's like you love her. You're totally in love with her. And he got this wide-eyed, ashen-faced look. Like all the color drained out of his face. And I was like, hey. Oh. You're in love with her. Okay.
Jenny goes on to say that she and Paul, they hadn't married at a young age, a naive age. That, you know, that kind of like, oh, I think love's some kind of dream. If you marry when you're 21, you're going to be with that person forever. They weren't naive about love. They were both 32 years old when they got married. And as she puts it, you only get one shot at it. You're in it to win it. They get married one time. And that crushes will come and go. So they have a conversation, and Jenny's reasonable and rational and mature. Paul relaxes and he says, thank God, I thought you would be mad. Jenny says, why would I be mad?
Paul, why would I be mad? Did you fuck her? And he said, no. And I said, oh, I get it. You did everything but fuck her, so that if I asked you this question, you could say no. And I walked outside.
After this, Jenny and Paul argue. At one point, he told her that his affair was because he was on a higher plane than others. Yeah, right, mate. Get the fuck. Jenny, in return, threw a shoe at him and called him a bastard. So heartbroken, devastated from this, what does Jenny do next? Well, she proposes this to Paul. If he wants a divorce, this is how it will go. She would move out, take their young daughter, Betty, and they would live elsewhere. He would then not have any contact for 5 years. And then the divorce could go through on the grounds of abandonment. What Jenny was wrestling with, what she was having a really hard time with, is that Betty was there when this was happening. So she asks Paul, how could you do this when your young daughter is in the house? His response, it's not great.
I said, so you're fucking this woman, or, you know, having various sexual relations with this woman while your daughter is down the hall. And he was like, no, she was downstairs. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? That makes a difference somehow? You were there with her to do something very important. Meet your bio dad for the first time. And you're going to go like, oh, well, while I was having sexual relations with this woman, she wasn't down the hallway. She was downstairs. What the fuck does that mean to you, sir? So yeah, things were pretty bad.
Paul goes on from here to explain that Rosita treats him well. And Jenny says, yeah, I'm sure she does. I'm sure she fucking worships you and tells you how amazing you are. I'm just going to let Jenny speak for a minute.
And so I'm living in a house with a person that was my best friend, my husband, and now I hate him. I'm living with someone I don't even like anymore. So, there were days where those days were rough. He said, I think we should go to couples counseling. And I said, I'm not doing a fucking thing for you, bro. I'm too mad. Why the fuck should I go to counseling because you are an asshole and because you fucked up? I'm not doing anything for you. Maybe when I feel better, I'll think about it. But you are going to therapy. That's for sure. And then with Rashida, like I'd come home and I'd be like, who are you talking to on the phone? Nobody? Right. Okay. You were talking to Rashida, and you can't do that anymore. But why? Why? I mean, I can't, have sex with her from here. You can't. You just can't. Because I said. Because I said. He really didn't get it.
So Jenny and Paul, they've had such a hard time working through this. And the next thing that Jenny does, it might surprise you, but I kind of really admire this. She calls Rosita. She says, you don't know me. You have no commitment to me. But my husband does. I have no problem with you. I don't want you to think I hate you, because I don't. I have concerns whether you're Paul's friend or not. You're willing to let him destroy his family. But beyond that, I need you to know that I don't blame you. Jenny and Rosita go on to have a lovely conversation, and it lasts an hour and a half. Jenny goes to Paul and she says, you need to tell your parents about this affair. And she tells them this. I'm going to tell everyone about this. Everyone is going to know that this happened.
I actually got 4 of his friends together. People who didn't particularly like me. And I called them and I said, you guys need to take this guy out. You're going to take Paul out and you're going to talk about this. I want him to know what you guys think about it. Because it's one thing to be fucking around when you're 20 years old. It's another thing when you're, 36 and have a kid. And they did. They did. They took him out and they were like, nope, not cool. You can't do that shit. You can't. And it's odd because I talked to them afterwards, because Paul's takeaway was that, well, they kind of understood the situation, and so, they could understand, what happened, and so they really got it. And so I talked to them, and they were like, I don't know where he got that message. We were saying no. No. Look, you fuck around when you're in your teens, you fuck around when you're in 20s, you can maybe fuck around when you're married. Don't fuck around when you have kids. Okay? It's just not all right.
Okay, so where does the story go from here? Jenny tells me that the end of the story is that there isn't an end to the story. Her and Paul are still together. And in her words, they are really fucking happy. Paul had stopped talking to Roshita. Jenny goes on to say,
there was one time where he was emailing a woman, and I was like, you can't really do that without me knowing about it, because we still have trust issues. And he was like, right. So I said, you need to tell her you can't communicate with right now, because we're not there yet. I don't trust you enough yet. And he stopped talking to her. And then I got to know her, and I started emailing with her, and we became Facebook friends and everything, and it was great. I mean, she had no designs on him at all, and it was one of those things of like, no, you can't do that for a while unless you are going to be very, very transparent. He started to understand that even if he didn't think that was necessary, that I did. And so what he thought or how he felt about that kind of thing was irrelevant. That he needed to simply do the things that I said he needed to do until I could trust him again. And it took a long time.
Jenny and Paul are still married now, and I'll end Jenny's story with these words from her.
We are actually pretty fucking happy. It was so awful and so devastating and so impossible to see how that would work out okay or good or anything, but it did. It did.
So during this process of putting this episode together, I threw out on the Facebook group a question, which was, does your first crush ever leave you? I'm just interested in this idea. I guess I'm just interested in, does the first love that you ever have ever go away? Or I don't know. So some of the responses were just incredible. So Hannah Gabriel said, it never leaves you. I still get heart flutters over a guy I had a serious crush on at school. But we're such different people now. I'm a tattooed creative with a taste for hip hop. He, on the other hand, is an established accountant, well dressed, and quite Prince Harry-ish. It almost happened between us about 8 years ago, but we'd grown up together, so it would have been kind of weird. I'm glad it never happened, but I still find myself drawn to him in a room. If he's there, I'm looking at him. Thank you, Hannah. Joanne Little, in response to that question, says, oh my God, no. I was travelling through Greece. I met a local and I fell in love. I ended up staying a year, but it was complicated not being a citizen. Came home and met the second love of my life, and we've now been together 25 years. I still wonder where that first love ended up. But hearing other people's responses, he's probably fat, bald, and old. Lovely. Thank you for that, Joanne. Erica says, I was always a little guy crazy. I had a wide variety of crushes. I didn't really have much time for boys my own age until I was 16. His name was James Bell. I met him when I worked in an ice cream shop, and he came in nearly every day to get a mint chocolate chip ice cream cone. He was this gorgeous, long-haired boy from England who was temporarily living in California. He was intelligent, funny, and sophisticated, and absolutely nothing like any of the boys in my high school. We dated the whole summer, and I was head over heels in love with him. I was broken-hearted when he had to return to England, and we wrote to each other for a very long time. Eventually, we both moved on. Erica says, I'm 43 years old, and I'm very happily married now, but he will always have a special little place in my heart. And then she adds, I suspect this is where I got my odd little fetish for accents. So, thank you, Erica. Okay, the final story, story 6. A kind of love that we need to talk about. Marina sends me this. 13 years ago, I got a little Rottweiler puppy. She was so cute, but with her giant feet, she was clumsy. My brother named her Gumby, and the name stuck. She was a typical puppy, naughty, cute, and stubborn to learn. So, Marina was still living with her parents at the time, and it meant that Gumby had to be an outside dog, and that's the way that the dogs in their family had always been. Eventually, Marina moves out, and she is super excited to live by herself. She says, it never occurred to me to bring Gumby inside. That's not the way we were brought up. But that lasted all of 10 minutes. And on her first night alone, the refrigerator ticked, she freaked out, and she brought her girl, Gumby, inside. And they cuddled in bed, and that was the way that it was forever. She says Gumby was by my side for the next 12 years. Where I went, she went. We planned everything around her. She was with Marina through bad relationships, job changes, breakups with friends, you fucking name it, she was there. She was the constant in Marina's life. Always willing to climb onto her lap and let Marina have just a really good cry. So Gumby was there when Marina met her partner, and he grew to love her in the same way that Marina did. Everyone loved her. Friends would snuggle with her on the couch, and she even had her own Facebook page, which I am going to go and check out. Now, in 12 years, she'd only ever needed to really go to the vet for routine checkups. She was, as Marina says, healthy as a horse. And everyone said, she's so healthy, she will outlive you. In June 2016, Marina came home and something odd happened. Gumby didn't come running to her at the door. Now, I don't know, like, if you got a dog, like I've got Alfie, and this is every single time I open the door, Alfie just runs towards me. He sort of jumps a bit like he's on like a trampoline. He just throws his body up towards me all the time. It's so excited about the fact that you're home. But Gumby didn't on this day. Marina says she was lying on the couch. She was short of breath, and she was obviously in pain. So Marina rushed her to a vet. They had emergency surgery to fix a twisted intestine. The vet was amazed that the old dog had survived the surgery, and they were really pleased with her recovery. So life went on. Life went back to normal. Great. But Gumby started to lose some weight, which stressed Marina out, and vets told her this is normal after surgery. In December of that same year, so 6 months after that first thing had happened, Marina comes home and Gumby is on the couch. She knows something is wrong. Gumby hasn't come to the door. Gumby is on the couch, desperately in need of some sort of help. Marina says, I rushed her to the hospital with an awful feeling in the pit of my stomach. I was terrified but hopeful. And I recognised these symptoms. It was the same as had happened in June. And I was pretty sure she would be fine. But the news wasn't good. Gumby needed surgery, but there was only a 5% chance that she would survive it. She was too old. Her body just hadn't recovered from the previous surgery. The vet then says to Marina, I mean, these are the words that I just never, I never want to hear these words. The vet says to Marina, I think it's time to euthanize her. Oh God. Marina says, I felt my legs give way. I climbed into her hospital cage and I sat with her silently. Okay. The next thing Marina did was she called her partner and they cried together on the phone. He would not be able to make it back in time to say goodbye. She called her mum. She messaged her dad and her sister-in-law. They were shown into a private room and Gumby was brought in. Marina says we sat with her and we cried for a long time until finally I called the vet and told him it was time. The vet injected her and left them to say their goodbyes. Gumby died on the 4th of December 2016, surrounded by everyone who loved her. At this point, Marina refuses any of her family's offers for company and she ignores calls. She doesn't want condolences. She spends days in bed with the curtains closed. She's just grieving. So slowly, very slowly, she starts to adapt to life without Gumby. She says this, which is interesting. For my adult life, my routine revolved around her. And yeah, I guess any pet owner will know that. Like, you can't make any decision in your adult life if you've got a pet without thinking, oh, I need to, yeah. And it just becomes like sort of second nature. I mean, I know that's like really stupid. Like, obviously, that's fucking how we all operate as human beings. You're always thinking about someone else. You're always thinking, how is that going to affect that person? Or how is this going to fit into that person's schedule? But at the same time, when you've got a pet, you just are on high alert all the time about what's going to happen here, and how long will he be left, and how long will she be left, and all that stuff. So after a few months, she decides to adopt a new dog. Now, she knows that this is never going to replace Gumby, of course not. But perhaps having a new furry friend around the house would help fill a hole left behind. So she searches and she finally finds a dog called Bessie at the local pound. Bessie had been abused and then had been given up by her previous owners. So Marina and her partner, they take Bessie in and they just give her an incredible life. She goes through lots of different dog stuff that's really difficult, like getting scared, getting whatever, but they work her through that. Marina says, I still think of Gumby often, and I take a moment to visit her whenever I go to my dad's house, because he'd buried her for Marina and he planted a tree. She says, but I can talk to her now without immediately bursting into tears. I just want to end with the end of Marina's email. She says, Baz, I wasn't sure why I wanted to write you about Gumby. Everyone has experienced loss. Close family members, partners, children. Luckily, I don't know what that grief feels like. I know Gumby was just a dog, but she was also my best friend and my absolute rock. And I think that kind of love should be talked about. Whoa, there's no one story in there that's worthy of hitting you harder than another. Yeah, it's just what it is. Okay, right, so I need to end this special episode now. I just need to wrap it up and tell you thank you so much if you got involved in helping me put this episode together. I genuinely am shocked. I'm genuinely so overwhelmed by the amount of people who got in touch and wanted to help me with this episode, and thank you so much. It's like I said in the beginning, it's such an intimate thing to hand over your story. We're all full of them. We've all got a million stories that we could tell, and if you think, yeah, it's fine, I'll just hand my story over, you're actually giving away a bit of yourself, and I thank you for doing that. I really do. I hope you enjoyed this crazy journey we've had through love. Okay? Goodbye.
I think sometimes my story is extraordinary.
It didn't affect me really one way or the other. I would imagine from the look on his face, let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over.